There's a passage in the Bible that almost no one comments on. A story that involves murder, manipulation, power, and a parable. It wasn't told by Jesus. It didn't happen in the Gospels. But it's there, in the Old Testament, and what it reveals is surprising. This parable was told in a tense moment, after a brutal massacre, where an ambitious man eliminated his own brothers to take control of a people. But someone escaped. And instead of seeking revenge, he climbed a mountain and told a story. Few people know this text. Even fewer understand what it means. But those who stop to read it carefully come away with a very serious warning. And there's a detail at the end that few people notice. A conclusion that ties everything together. When you hear it, you'll understand why this might be one of the most ignored and most necessary parables in the entire Bible. I'm Caleb Rivers, and if you like studying difficult texts, if you feel something is wrong with some leadership, or if you've ever wondered why so many good people remain silent, then stay with me until the end, and if that speaks to you, go ahead and like this video and subscribe so YouTube knows to keep showing you content like this. This story will make you see leadership, calling, and omission in a completely different way. To understand the parable we're going to study today, you need to know the scenario in which it was told. We're in the book of Judges, chapter 9. It's the period right after Gideon's death, the same one who freed Israel from the Midianites with an army of only 300 men. Gideon was a judge used by God, but he ended his life with some questionable decisions. One of them was having many children with many women, including a concubine from the city of Shechem. With this woman, he had a son named Abimelech, and that's exactly where the story starts to get complicated. After Gideon's death, Israel entered a leadership vacuum. There was no defined successor, and Abimelech saw this as an opportunity. But instead of being recognized by merit, he took power by force. Abimelech goes to the people of Shechem, the people of his mother's city, and convinces the leaders there to support the idea that one of Gideon's sons should govern. And of course, the ideal son would be him. What he does next is heavy. He kills almost all his brothers, 70 in total, to eliminate any competition for the throne. Only one brother escapes. The youngest. His name was Jotham. And it's this Jotham who, instead of seeking revenge with his hands, decides to climb a mountain and speak loudly. He tells a parable. This parable is short, simple, but carries one of the most direct warnings about leadership, omission, and spiritual consequences. And that's what we're going to analyze from now on. After Gideon's death, as we saw, there was no king or judge taking leadership of Israel. This period of emptiness opened space for disputes, and it was exactly then that Abimelech acted. He wasn't recognized by God. He wasn't raised up by any prophet. He presented himself as a candidate. Abimelech was Gideon's son with a concubine. This means that, among Gideon's many sons, he had a lower social status. But he knew how to use this to his advantage. He went to the people of Shechem, his mother's land, and argued as follows. Is it better for you to be governed by 70 men, Gideon's sons, or by one who is of your blood? With this argument, he gained support. The people of Shechem gave money, influence, and structure. And Abimelech hired violent men to execute the plan. The result? He killed 70 brothers, all at once on the same stone, something that indicates organized, calculated execution. The text of Judges 9 makes it clear, this wasn't an impulse. It was strategy. But one brother escaped, Jotham. And Jotham's reaction wasn't to seek physical revenge. He didn't assemble an army, nor did he try to bring down Abimelech by force. He used words. He climbed Mount Gerizim, which was a symbolic place, where blessings were proclaimed, and told a public parable. We'll see this parable in the next section, but here's the practical reflection. Why did Abimelech have space to act? Because no one stood up before. The people were complacent. Gideon's legitimate sons didn't present themselves as an alternative. The throne remained empty. And when the place of influence becomes vacant, someone occupies it. Not always someone prepared. This part of the story shows that the problem doesn't begin when the thornbush rises up. It begins when the fruit trees remain silent. After the massacre committed by Abimelech, Jotham, the only surviving brother, climbs Mount Gerizim and speaks loudly to the people who had supported that coup. Instead of accusing directly, he chooses to tell a parable. Here's the summary of what he says, Judges 9 verses 8 to 15. The trees decided to choose a king. They first went to the olive tree and said, "Be our king." The olive tree responded, "Should I leave my oil, which honors God and men, to sway over the trees?" Then they went to the fig tree and heard something similar. "Should I give up my sweet fruit to govern?" Then they tried with the vine, "Come reign over us." But the vine also refused. Finally, they went to the thornbush. And the thornbush said, "Sure, I'll reign over you. But if you don't truly accept me, fire will come out of me and burn even the cedars of Lebanon." Let's understand this parable as a lesson. Who are these trees? Olive tree, fig tree, and vine were the most valued trees of the time. They produced oil, food, and wine, essential things. The thornbush, on the other hand, produces nothing useful. It doesn't bear fruit, doesn't offer shade. It just takes up space and can cause harm. What is this parable saying? That those who had fruit and real value refused to take responsibility. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of complacency, maybe out of a false idea that governing isn't for me. Meanwhile, the thornbush, which had nothing to offer, took control. And still threatened, "If you don't accept me, I'll destroy everything." The problem wasn't just the thornbush accepting the throne. The problem was that the fruit trees said, "No." The space was left vacant. And it was occupied by someone without preparation, without fruits, without character. And what does this have to do with today? A lot. In many contexts, empty leadership only establishes itself because the capable ones remain silent. In families, ministries, churches, organizations, when those with maturity stay quiet, those with ambition appear. The result: influence misused, relationships hurt, and an environment where the thornbush dictates the rules. This parable is a direct warning. If you have fruit, have a calling, have preparation, but don't take responsibility, you might be opening space for something much worse. In the next part of the video, we'll see what happened to Abimelech and the people who chose him, and how the parable was fulfilled literally. In the previous part, we saw the parable that Jotham told, the trees that refused to reign, and the thornbush that assumed power. He ends that speech with a warning, that if the choice of Abimelech was made with justice, fine. But if not, fire would come out of the thornbush and destroy even the cedars of Lebanon. Now let's see how this was fulfilled. Abimelech reigned for 3 years. And at first, everything seemed under control. But over time, the tension between him and the leaders of Shechem began to grow. They began to distrust him, and started planning the downfall of the very king they had helped put on the throne. And then the collapse begins. The leaders of Shechem turn against Abimelech. Abimelech responds with even greater violence. He invades the city, kills many people, destroys everything. Then he goes to a fortress where several leaders were hiding and sets fire to the place with everyone inside. This would already be tragic enough. But Abimelech continues his campaign. He goes to another city called Thebez and tries to do the same. But this time, something different happens. A woman, from the top of the tower, throws a millstone at his head. The blow is so strong that he knows he's going to die. So he asks his assistant to kill him with a sword, so he won't be remembered as someone who died by a woman. And he dies there. This ending matches exactly what Jotham had warned in the parable. The thornbush took over. It brought destruction to the city. And in the end, it was also destroyed. In other words, the problem wasn't just the thornbush. It was also the decision of those who chose it. The city of Shechem suffered, Abimelech fell, and the leadership that seemed like a solution became a tragedy. The prophecy wasn't just symbolic. It was a real warning, which was fulfilled in detail. This text teaches something that is very practical. Bad leadership choices affect everyone. And when the called ones stay silent or hide, the consequences fall on everyone, including those who thought they were benefiting from the thornbush. We can't look at this story just as something ancient. It shows a dynamic that still exists. When responsibility is abandoned, the space is occupied by those who shouldn't be there. And when this happens, there's always damage, sooner or later. In the next and final section, we'll close with the main lesson of this parable, and how it can apply to your personal life. What we learn from this parable, and from the story's outcome, is something very simple, but that needs to be spoken with clarity. The throne of influence never stays empty. Whenever someone with preparation, character, and calling refuses to occupy a space, someone without preparation will try to occupy it. There is no neutrality when it comes to leadership. Where there's space, someone takes over. And it's not always someone with the right heart. That's what happened in Judges 9. The fruit trees, which represented people with substance, with value, refused leadership. And the thornbush, which had nothing to offer, accepted and destroyed. And this dynamic repeats itself to this day. In the church, when those with spiritual calling don't get involved. In the family, when fathers and mothers don't take on the role of guiding with firmness and love. In society, when those who have conscience and values prefer silence to responsibility. We can also apply this to personal life. There are people who know they were called to something, serving, teaching, leading, counseling, discipling, but they withdraw. Sometimes out of fear, other times out of complacency. And then what happens? The space is occupied by empty influence. The thornbush appears, gains space, and begins to affect everyone. This parable is a call to responsibility. It shows that if you have fruit, you have something that builds up, that transforms, that was entrusted to you, then you also have the responsibility not to hide. Because if you don't occupy that place, someone will. And the cost of that, often, comes in the form of consequences that affect much more than just you. Let's review the main points of the story. Abimelech was not raised up by God. He assumed power through personal ambition, using manipulation and violence. Gideon's legitimate sons, who could have taken on the leadership role, remained silent. Jotham was the only one who survived. Instead of resorting to physical confrontation, he used words. He told a parable with a very clear warning. The good trees refused to reign. In the end, the thornbush occupied the place, and everything ended in destruction. The prophecy was fulfilled in detail. Both Abimelech and the leaders who supported him were destroyed. This text shows that the problem isn't always just who takes control. Sometimes, the problem begins when those who should be leading decide to step away. And this applies to any area of life. Family, ministry, projects, church, work. If you were called, equipped, have maturity and fruit, but decide not to get involved, this can open space for unprepared people to influence others. If this makes sense to you, leave here in the comments. I don't want to let the thornbush occupy my place. Share this video with someone who is running from their calling, even knowing they were set apart for something greater. And if you want to continue learning from biblical stories that almost no one teaches, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Not every parable comes with a happy ending. This one ends with a serious warning. Those who have fruit have responsibility. We can't control who will step forward to lead. But we can decide not to leave the space vacant. Thank you for following along until here. Until the next video.